Mrs. Marlene Lord Lewis, President of NIHERST, Dr. Chris Maharaj, the President of APETT, Mr. Fazir Khan, Managing Director, Alpha Engineering and Design, Mrs. Catherine Badlu Durga, the Director of Drainage Division, acting at the Ministry of Works and Transport, Dr. Vincent Cooper, Lecturer at the Department of Civil and Environmental Engineering at the University of the West Indies, members of the NIHERST team and the NIHERST family, APETT staff, engineers, business professionals, educators, ladies and gentlemen. Good evening. My name is Hema Ramkisoon, and I'll be your moderator for this extremely, I can't say a very special, and I'm sure a knowledge-filled evening, one where ideas will be exchanged. Welcome to our webinar, Finding Solutions to the Engineering Challenges. This is session 1, titled Drainage. It's a collaborative initiative between the National Institute of Higher Education, Research, Science and Technology, NIHERST, and the Association of Professional Engineers of Trinidad and Tobago, APETT. Now, how opportune is this webinar, as evident by the changing weather patterns and its effects on our citizenry, the drainage, infrastructure? It simply has been an elevated topic. In fact, you just look at social media and the weather reports and the images, they do paint 1,000 words to all of our stories. Now, we congregate today to conduct healthy discourse, which includes tripartite representation from academia, industry, and of course the government, all with a view towards solving pain points in our society. I want to also remind you that the views expressed are independent thoughts of all of our panelists. As one of the key stakeholders, we begin with NIHERST, a presentation from the organization, a presentation that's focusing simply on the collaboration and the critical role of science, technology, and innovation in the environment and environmental and transformation.
As the leader in science, technology, and innovation, NIHERST, we are pleased to partner with APETT on today's webinar, Finding Solutions to Engineering Challenges. As we work together towards this common goal, it is clear that we have begun to chart the course towards realizing tangible results. How did this collaboration come to the fore, you may ask? The synergy is clear between what we do at NIHERST and APETT. NIHERST, a statutory body currently under the Ministry of Education, was incorporated in 1984 to promote the development of science, technology, and higher education in Trinidad and Tobago, and enhance the innovative, creative, and entrepreneurial capabilities of the general population. Likewise, APETT, through its professional body of engineers, strives to stimulate awareness of technology and the role of the engineer in society. Both parties are indeed committed to future-proofing our nation. At NIHERST, we remain steadfast to this tenet and place every effort towards enabling society. Through our efforts, we envisage a nation and a region that can apply scientific, technological, and innovative solutions to propel socio-economic and environmental transformation. There is no better time to accelerate tomorrow's future than today. But how do we do this? At NIHERST, this is effected primarily through research and policy development, conducting statistical surveys for decision-making, digital fabrication and prototyping, and STEM, science, technology, engineering, and math integration. Notably, this core offering of STEM integration feature highlights the linkage between NIHERST and APETT. STEM places emphasis on innovation, problem solving, and critical thinking, and together they make up a popular and fast-growing industry. This integrated learning style revolves around coding and programming, learning through digital mediums, robotics, and more. But one may ask, how is engineering important in STEM? STEM is the integrated approach to learning. Engineering is what connects the disciplines. Engineers seek solutions to problems, then apply scientific knowledge and mathematics to design, build, and maintain technologies to solve the problems. STEM is necessary for growing the economy and staying globally competitive. More and more, we see the synergy emerging. This partnership between NIHERST and APETT has been sealed by a memorandum of cooperation with the overarching goals of promoting and supporting the development of collaborations in the fields of science, technology, and innovation, STI, facilitating information exchange, and assisting with content development for the advancement of STI in the public domain, and highlighting the engineering component of STEM. Projects to include an Engineering Icons video series, feasibility study to establish a mentorship internship program sourced from the APETT database, and this, our tripartite public seminar series that addresses engineering challenges or societal pain points. As we are aware, today's session will focus on drainage. Drainage is but one of the many local pain points that we wish to remedy. We are aware of the impact of climate change on creating such pain points. Many of these pain points can be attributed to the global effects brought about by the rising changes in our global climate. We must also be cognizant of our role in the matter and how we can affect change. It is evident that as climate change exacerbates the intensity of natural disasters such as drought and flooding, there are also cost-effective systems that can be adopted by communities. Notably, NIHERST rainwater harvesting project is but one of the environmental projects that is a sustainable solution to help address the societal pain point of flooding. The rainwater harvesting project was primarily envisioned to address water scarcity issues, but it also has the potential to help address some of the impacts of poor drainage systems locally by controlling and regulating the surface water runoff that typically leads to flooding. Thus far, installation of rainwater harvesting systems in water-scarce community has been completed in 18 primary and secondary schools and 4 community centers. Today's sessions will certainly explore both small and large-scale responses. Though our issues cannot be solved overnight, it is intent that this collaboration will inspire persons to adopt responsible best practices as it relates to drainage infrastructure, increase adherence to the proper protocols as it pertains to land use change by communities, become knowledgeable to identify drainage issues, stimulate policy formulation and adoption, subscribe to the proper climate change practices, develop ideas towards the alleviation of community pain points, and also lay the foundation for the establishment of the mentorship program. We are all in this together. Let's work together to make our nation a better place for all.
Thank you very much, NIHERST, for such an informative presentation. We anxiously anticipate your upcoming endeavors as you simply continue to chart the course forward towards a STEM-enriched future. At this time, we welcome the CEO of the Cuba-Tabaquí-Talparo Regional Corporation and the President of the Association of Professional Engineers of Trinidad and Tobago. Dr. Chris Maharaj, we're asking him to share on the responsibility of the regional corporation with respect to development and the associated drainage approvals, the drainage approval process, enforcement mechanisms, pollution, and the effects in relation to climate change. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Maharaj and Ms. Hind Maharaj.
Hi, I am Hind Maharaj, the Acting Chief Executive Officer of the Cuba-Tabaquí-Talparo Regional Corporation. I have just been here for 9 months. However, prior to this, I have been a civil engineer with the Ministry of Rural Development and Local Government for the past 10 years.
Can you elaborate on the domain of responsibility of the regional corporation with respect to development and associated drainage approvals?
Okay, so when an application is made for a building or development, approval, it starts at the Town and Country Planning Division. When that application is made, the Town and Country Planning Division determines which entities have to give separate approvals. This could be Drainage Division, Ministry of Works and Transport, Highways, if there's any particular road building exercise that needs to be done that's quite large, Fire, WASA, and of course it comes to our corporation here for both provisional approvals and final approval.
Thanks. Can you describe the processes involved in approving properties and developments, especially with respect to drainage considerations?
Yes. So when the application goes to Town and Country Planning Division, they will determine based on the size of the development. Anything that's more than 7 lots is generally sent to the Ministry of Works and Transport Drainage Division for approval. Anything less than 7 lots is sent to our corporation for approval. This is regarding drainage, and it's a pretty simple process whereby that approval goes to our technical department, and our corporation engineer reviews in terms of the sizing of the drains, the flows in, the flows out, how it meets the current drainage in existence, and ensures that it can take the capacity of the water going forward, and we give the approval on the corporation side. But you should also note that if there's any complication or if our engineer is not comfortable giving those approvals, he can refer that drainage approval to the Ministry of Works and Transport Drainage Division. So essentially, I would say that the main distinction is the size of the development. If it's a very large development over 7 lots, the Ministry of Works and Transport Drainage Division is responsible for the drainage approvals. Less, it's our corporation. Other than that, and I did mention, the corporation gives the provisional approval. With that, we use the design that's on the application. So designs for roads, designs for drains, the fire hydrant design. So there are lots of designs that are required. One other agency I did not mention before was CMOH, and they are responsible for approving the wastewater management of the development. They are also required to give approval, and that's something that we also wait for before we give their provisional approval. Beyond that, once whatever is in the design is constructed, we would give final approval. We do have some challenges in terms of when the design is not followed. So sometimes a contractor or building, whoever the applicant, may not stick to the design, and we may not grant final approval based on the fact that it's not what was approved by either the Ministry of Works and Transport or our corporation, and they do the necessary changes, after which approval is granted. So that's just a summary of what goes on in terms of the process for approvals.
What are your thoughts on the enforcement mechanisms that the regional corporation has on drainage matters?
So Chris, like I mentioned before, we have 2 sections under the Public Health Ordinance and also the Municipal Corporations Act that we can act on in terms of pollution of the environment, blocking of water courses. However, in terms of my thoughts on the enforcement, when things proceed to a legal stance or we have to take it to the courts, it's a very long process, and sometimes we're not able to get any resolution to the matter in a short-term frame. So I think in terms of how to move forward, we can look at probably reviewing the policies on the enforcement on behalf of the corporation, and this can be done under our local government reform, which is something that is coming out pretty soon into the local government stream, and we look forward to trying to ensure that our water courses are protected, that we make our burgesses aware that there will be consequences for polluting our environment.
How is the regional corporation managing concerns of pollution leading to blockage of watercourses and the effects of climate change where more severe weather events are anticipated?
I think we could look at that from 2 points of view, from 2 sides. So at the corporation recently, we've had a few activities, or we have objectives to carry out certain activities in the mitigating area. So currently we have a curbside recycling initiative. We partner with SwimCall in 3 areas in our corporation. So in that way, we're trying to promote no pollution, taking care of our environment. And then also we're looking to set up a composting facility in collaboration with yourself, UE, SwimCall, and Ministry of Agriculture. And we're trying to promote a greener environment, a cleaner environment. So from that aspect, in terms of climate change, that's where the corporation is going. So we're trying to just make the Burgesses of this corporation aware of what they can do to keep our environment clean. I would also mention we had an initiative with SwimCall last week Friday, the Chase Charlie Away campaign, where we raised awareness for the Burgesses in our area. I think this was the first region they went to, again promoting a cleaner environment, awareness of what can happen with climate change, and in terms of mitigation, that's where this corporation is going. On the other side, I am foreseeing that we have to do some collaborations with the other entities who are responsible for giving approvals under the building approval process, specifically Ministry of Works and Transport Drainage Division, because what has been happening in our corporation and what we've been seeing is a lot of flooding activities in other developments that are downstream from recent developments that have been constructed. What we are currently trying to move forward on is determining whether approvals for drainage should be given just looking at a pinpoint area where new developments are to be built without looking at the downstream effects. In some instances that is not considered, so that is definitely one way that we have to work together, collaborate with other agencies, specifically drainage, to ensure that our climate change in terms of rainfall intensity, in terms of how much rainfall we're currently getting, doesn't affect the other developments that are currently existing.
Mrs. Maharaj, thank you very much for having this interview with us. Thanks again.
Thank you, Chris, for having me, and I hope that whatever my information was useful and can bring about some positive change for us as a corporation and definitely for the country as a whole.
Thank you very much for setting the stage for a very fruitful discourse. Participants, please remember to place your comments in the chat box and we will respond during our Q&A segment. At this point in time, I want to introduce you to our first panelist for the evening, Mr. Fazir Khan, the Managing Director of Alpha Engineering and Design. Now, Mr. Khan has over 30 years of experience as a practicing professional civil engineer and project manager, working locally and also within the Caribbean basin. Fazir graduated from the University of the West Indies, Trinidad, with a BSc Honours in Civil Engineering. He also obtained a diploma in management from Henley University in the UK and has certificates in project management from the Arthur Lockjack Graduate School of Business. Now, apart from the Association of Professional Engineers of Trinidad and Tobago, where he was a past president during the period 2016 to 2017 and made a fellow in 2019, he's also a registered member of the Board of Engineering of Trinidad and Tobago and a member of the British Hydrological Society. Mr. Khan currently also serves on the Industrial Liaison Committee for the University of the West Indies, reporting to the Joint Board of Moderators in Cambridge. He is the current president of the JCC, that is a joint council for the construction industry, since 2019. Welcome, Mr. Khan. I know we are in the cricket season, so it would be, I think you're the first batsman up today, and we have to open the discussion. Let me ask you this question. What are some of the key considerations aimed at flood mitigation in Trinidad and Tobago?
Thanks, Emma. I think the first thing we need to recognize and reinforce is that climate change has a twofold effect on flooding. First, there has been an increase in rainfall intensities to the order of magnitude of about 10%. And there has also been an increase in the frequency of high-intensity rainstorms, which has led to an increase in both the frequency and the increase in the depth of floods. Civil engineers cater for this in our hydrological assessment and also thereafter in the hydraulic designs to suit site-specific conditions. In generic terms, contemporary designs dictate that we include such principles as sustainable urban drainage, low impact development, and best management practices. Now, the other major factor is sea level rise that is influenced by climate change. The current medium-term projection for the Caribbean is for about 600 millimeters or 2 feet increase in sea level in the next 60 years. That's about 10 millimeters per year. The previous estimates on record in terms of the literature reviews would be 3 millimeters per year. Since all our natural drainage systems eventually drain to the sea, there is tidal influence at the outfalls, which exacerbates both the duration and the depth of floods that we can experience. The next important thing is to categorize the areas that are prone to flooding versus the ones that are not. But even the areas that are not prone to flooding can be affected by protracted rainfall in terms of erosion and landslides. And we see this on a daily basis on our TVs in relation to the poor soils that we have in the central range and the landslides that occur. But landslides also occur and erosion also occurs in the northern range due to the steepness of those slopes. And that has a knockdown effect of carrying silt into the existing man-made and natural watercourses, which compounds flooding problems. Areas that are prone to flooding can be further categorized into areas where we have flash floods, like the foothills of the northern range or the central range, and other areas in the central plains of Trinidad or say southwest Tobago that will experience long duration floods. In general terms, at scale, I know that in the previous video there was a discussion about the use of rainwater harvesting. Now that would work at scale, at a larger scale. In terms of the state or in large developments, we employ detention or retention ponds, which is an important tool that we can use, but it does take some land space, and that is a pro and a con. And we can get into more details about best management practices, low impact development, or sustainable drainage in further discourse.
And I'm almost certain, Mr. Khan, during the Q&A segment, I'm almost certain that more questions will be posed to you. Thank you very much for providing such valuable information and the insight that we needed. It is always gracious as well as encouraging that at events such as these, we welcome the thoughts of the custodians, given the portfolio to maintain and advance such dynamics. With that being said, allow me to bring to the forefront Ms. Kathleen Badloon Durga, the Acting Director of the Drainage Division at the Ministry of Works and Transport. Mrs. Durga has worked with the ministry for over 18 years in 3 major divisions, 10 years in the Construction Division, 7 years as Chief Planning Engineer in the Highways Division, and currently as the aforementioned. The Director has served on multiple committees ranging from disaster prevention and preparedness to also structural assessments and retrofitting, as well as community flood early warning systems on behalf of the ministry. Welcome to the discussion, Mrs. Durga. Now, I have to ask about the question when we talk about the custodians. What are the main challenges affecting the drainage division at the Ministry of Works and Transport?
Hi, afternoon, everyone. Thanks for having me. Very pleased to be here. where do we begin? We have so many challenges that we have to face on a daily basis. So I'll narrow it down to the three most common. So firstly, we have uncontrolled development. And this in itself is a major problem and a challenge that we have with the division. Usually, as mentioned before by the two previous speakers, developments have to get approval over a certain size. And when they're not approved and just constructed, we have uncontrolled runoff from those developments that are not properly channeled to a proper drainage system. So that's one. The second one we have right now is encroachment and squatting. It's not a popular issue we like to discuss, but it's happening on a daily basis. We have to have ways to access our drainage and our major watercourses. And with those uncontrolled encroachment issues, we don't have enough access to do our yearly maintenance. And it's posing a real challenge. So when we have to go in and people are complaining that we're going through their land when it's in fact our land, our river reserves, it's a real challenge that we have to face on a daily basis, and it's not pretty. So those two are a major one, but we can't forget indiscriminate dumping of garbage. I mean, everyone hears me say it over and over. It's a problem. As a society, we have a problem. We need to face this problem head on and see how we can try to mitigate that so we don't have as much buildup of garbage that blocks and clogs all the water courses right now. So in a nutshell, that's what we're dealing with today.
I know I can say that nutshell really does contain a lot in it. So thank you very much, Mrs. Durga, for an amazing contribution and placing your inputs into perspective. Our intention with the present seminar is not only to serve you with valuable information, but also to create an environment where healthy discussions can be entertained and fruitful ideas can be generated with a clear vision to actualization. You are reminded that you are welcome to submit any questions or comments that you may have for any of our panelists in the respective sections of the live stream. All will be attended, at least I can promise, or try to promise that all will be attended. Our third and final panelist for this evening is Dr. Vincent Cooper. Dr. Cooper lectures in water resources and environmental engineering at the Department of Civil and Environmental Engineering at the University of the West Indies. His main interest of research is the application of hydrologic and hydraulic methods and that should be models for the prediction of floods. He's a graduate of the University of the West Indies with a BSc in civil engineering. He also holds an MSc as well as a PhD in applied hydrology and a master's in engineering with a major in environmental engineering. His early civil engineering career was spent at the Drainage Division of the Water Resource Agency, that's better known as WASA, to Trinidad and Tobago. Over the last 20 years, he has assisted several Caribbean governments in developing detailed flood hazard maps for specific problematic catchments. And we've heard about these terms when we read about the flooding problem in the Caribbean. He's also used various hydrological and hydraulic modeling techniques to find these solutions on the problematic areas. Dr. Vincent Cooper is a registered engineer and a member of the Chartered Institution for Water and Environmental Management. Welcome to the panel, Dr. Cooper. And of course, we continue to try to find solutions. So my question to you, what is required to develop an effective flood risk management or effective flood risk management in the face of climate change that we've been talking about, and the climate change we see how it's been manifesting in the country?
Thanks again, Hema, and good evening, everybody. And it's a real pleasure to be here. I want to use a paper that I had written some time ago, well, not too long ago, about a year ago, after the floods in Western Europe. And it was particularly interesting because we would not have expected the sort of devastation that we had witnessed in such a developed society. And it sort of, well, it certainly was an eye-opener for me. And it sort of made me realize that, you know, we have to start looking at these particular events more carefully and ensure that we are working towards building our system of governance for flooding to ensure that we are able to withstand and and to continue developing after such events. So the paper had been written some time ago. I'll just take a little bit of snippets from it because I still think it's relevant, and in fact it's relevant even today. So the first question I think we would want to know is, can such floods occur here in Trinidad and Tobago? Okay, and I guess the other question is, what would be the scale of damage we could expect if such floods were to occur? And the answer to both of them are yes. The first one, can floods happen in Trinidad and Tobago, is very much so because of how we have developed our lands, the land use practices that we have pursued. And the other one, the other factor, as mentioned by Fazil, is the climate change, the extreme events that we are getting. So these two events, these two factors combined are very much present in Trinidad and Tobago. And perhaps we are just lucky that we haven't seen the sort of scale that we have been witnessing on television. I did ask after 2018-2019 floods in Greenvale and South Oakwood some meteorologists as to whether such was possible in, say, a developed catchment like Diego Martin. And they said, for sure, it can happen. And, it kind of piqued my interest to determine, are we ready for the consequences of such an event? And so I want to focus a little bit on what does it mean to have a flood risk management system in place so that we are able, as I said, to move on after such events were to occur. And looking at the literature, there are 5 measures that usually form, if you want to say, the basket of measures that you should have in your flood risk management system. And they are the flood defense, which is typically what we do in Trinidad and Tobago. The Drainage Division builds detention basins. They look at rivers to ensure that they are widened and dredged and so on. And that is all fine. And that is really trying to keep the water away from people. But we can't engineer our way out of the problem, as we have realized, because it's just an upward spiral of rainfall intensity and the consequent damage. So there are 4 other measures. I'll quickly go over them, and then I'll just briefly mention what perhaps might be needed in the country to ensure that we are able to get these measures in place. The next one is really flood prevention, and that is just the opposite. We are trying to keep people away from the water. We don't want them to encroach in areas that are prone to flooding. And of course, we need to get some techniques to do so. That can come, in the discussion that follows. The next measure is flood mitigation. It's really saying, okay, I live in a floodplain. What can I do to ensure that I survive, that I'm able to continue? And that is measures such as essentially flood proofing, flood wall, flood gates, and ensuring that the electrical outlets are above flood levels, ensuring that you perhaps build on stilts, which was an old practice long ago. Flood preparation is the next, which means that we are able to provide people with early enough signals for them to respond appropriately to the pending flood. So we let them know that a flood of this particular magnitude is expected, and so they are able to take measures to protect themselves, for one, property, as well as evacuate if necessary. And then the last one is, having experienced that flood, we don't simply say that the flood came and it went. We want to make sure that we are able to learn from that event. And it requires, the tools necessary for doing the analysis. I just want to quickly go through some of the weaknesses I'm seeing in our system to ensure that we are able to get these measures in place, so that even if we know that we experience flood, it doesn't really stymie us as we want to move forward. So improvement of our data collection capabilities in terms of being able to measure the physical features of the land. Major problem is rainfall, especially when rainfall is so spatially confined. So rain is falling somewhere in Diego Martin, but Port of Spain is dry and it falls at very high intensities. How are we able to capture that rainfall data so that we are able to make sense of the event that caused that particular event, that devastation, and we can be able to prepare in the future? The appropriate application of modern techniques for predicting flood water levels and velocities, that is using the flood models that have been developed over the years that have great capacity that will give us the insights. The other thing is making sure that we are able to get resources required for undertaking these measures. First, for developing these measures to the fullest, as well as to carry them out. It's not always clear that we are going to get the funds that we need in order to do that stuff. And I guess the last one is really to ensure, like this particular forum is doing, that we are able to educate our public so that they are sensitized to the problems that are likely to happen, that they know what is there, what can be done for them, and they are able, therefore, to use that knowledge to continue making demands of the system to ensure that we have these 5 measures that I described well developed and able to ensure that lives are not lost and property is not lost when events such as this knock on our door. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Cooper, for that contribution there. And I know that the questions have already started. So at this juncture, I'm going to open the floor to the audience. And I know that many of you may have questions for our panelists. Allowing that our time will permit. I know we started a couple of minutes late, so we are going to extend a little beyond our intended time. I know we were scheduled to finish promptly at 6, but our organizers have graciously agreed, and our panelists will also agree to stay on to ensure that we get the most out of these discussions. So I have some questions here that have already started coming in, and I want to start with the first question, and I guess any of our panelists can take this. What is being done to update IDF curves to allow for climate change? I don't know who would like. I think, Dr. Cooper, that may fall more for you. I'm almost certain of that.
I don't know why I laughed, but it is a major issue because that, in fact, is the basis upon which most of our drains are sized. And without updated IDF curves that take into account the sort of rainfall events that we have been having, then we are perhaps not designing accordingly. There are new techniques. I know Water Resources Agency is, avidly collecting data, and I know that they are trying to expand their resources to ensure that they're able to get it out timely. The university does some stuff. Some time ago, we had done, the modernization, I guess, of some rainfall stations, IDF curve, and, we apply some new techniques. I guess Water Resources Agency will be applying these as well. But I guess Fazil and Catherine might have other things to say.
Do our panelists want to jump in for any comments on this?
This is Fazil. Yeah, so usually when we design the planning horizon is sometimes 50 to 100 years. So typically what we do is try to get the latest curves from the WRA or PIACO, for instance, and then we apply what the literature suggests could be as high as 10% for the future.
Similarly, yes, that's true. In the drainage division, I think there is no stipulated percentage really that is published for us to use. So they just use a safety factor more or less within that 10% frame. So we just cater for that added rainfall in the design. but there is no like hard and fast rule right now to cater for climate change.
Okay. So I think that is something that hopefully after this discussion, we can get the ear of the policymakers to act on that one. We do have a comment coming in and I want to read this as it is and ask your opinion from all of our panelists. And this is from Mark. I wish to recommend that hydrological data provided by water resources be made available free of charge, and there should be no reason to withhold such data from engineers trying to execute the drainage design. So I'm going to ask our panelists and Dr. Cooper, only because I remember you teaching me the difference earlier. I will start with you again on your thoughts, and then we'll get the rest of the panelists to comment.
Yeah, and I agree. And again, I'm hearing Water Resources Agency is moving in that direction. But I just want to support that particular comment, because if data is made available freely, it means that a large number of persons, of engineers who are keenly looking at the event will be able to collect that information and to perform analyses on them to determine what might have been the reason for a particular flood. But without that bit of information, and in fact it's a quite laborious process to get data that is very, very current. Without that bit of information, we are missing that. We are missing the opportunity for bringing more and more people in to look after our flooding, because that is the result. More people are able to see it, more solutions are available, more ideas are around, and we're able to move forward from there.
I would ask the rest of the panelists if they have any comments on this before we move on.
Yeah, this is Fazir. I've been advocating for this for the last 20 years. Now it falls under the umbrella of open source data, and as a government policy, they really need to move towards all of this public data as open source data. I understand from talking to various people in the ministries that there are some legal issues, but in most developed countries in the world, you can go in any state, in the states, for instance, and pull down the current data for stream flows and rainfall, etc., which gives an engineer a lot of data to work with in order to come up with optimal solutions. Thank you.
Ms. Durga?
I don't want to be too harsh on WRA, because remember, that's their policy at this point in time. We can't dictate what they want to do, if they want to charge for it, if they don't want to charge for it. I personally would like to see the data available free of charge, but it's a policy decision on their part. We can't really, if Dr. Cooper is saying it's going in that direction, that's a really positive change to see. But I know WRA would have the final say whether or not that's made free of charge or they leave it at a charge. I'm not sure why the charge is there, but it's there and it's their policy right now. So we'll just hope that the policy changes soon.
Okay. Now we have another question coming in, and Mr. Durga, I think this one will definitely be directed to you first for your comments, and then the rest of the panelists. So the question is, what about maintenance of water courses? There is constant flooding and approved developments. There's constant flooding and in relation to the approved developments.
I think the maintenance of the water courses is a yearly project. I mean, everyone who sees us see that we are doing that maintenance throughout the year. It's not just in the dry season or the wet season, it's done throughout the year. So it is being done. Again, it's being done subject to funding. We do really get sufficient, well, not sufficient funds, we get funds to do that desilting. The reason some developments are being flooded out, even though they are approved developments, maybe in one of the, suddenly we get a lot of concentrated rainfall. It's called microbursts in certain areas. And that increased rainfall, I mean, none of us could stop it. We could try to mitigate as much as possible, but that's where that setback comes into play. When you get your approval and the development gets approval, that setback, that key setback from the watercourse. It's why it's there. It's to protect you from that type of overflow. But the maintenance is being done throughout the year.
I don't know if any of our other panelists would care to weigh in on this before we go to the other question.
That's a no.
I guess, Ms. Durga, they just left that one up for you. This one is directed specifically to Mr. Khan. What influences the choice between retention and detention ponds in the drainage design?
Okay, so that's a very good question. So let me just, for the general public out there who may not be engineers, the difference between a retention and a detention pond is simply a retention pond holds the water from a specific rainfall event and is discharged sometime later. A detention pond, on the other hand, has water flow into it and out of it at the same time, but it attenuates the peak flow, meaning that it reduces the peak discharge that one would get if one did not have a detention pond, and thereby reduces the downstream impact of flooding. How do we determine the difference? And you will find that typically in private developments, they will opt for retention ponds versus detention ponds, because detention ponds, I should say, as opposed to retention ponds, because they take up less space and essentially have a similar effect in terms of attenuation of the peak discharge. Retention ponds require operation in terms of being someone coming to allow the water to flow out sometime after the storm. And by definition, they would tend to be much larger and possibly even much deeper. And the mechanism for letting them drain out will also be different.
Okay, thank you very much. Now, Ms. Durga, this is a follow-up question to a previous question, so I think this is more directed to you. Much of the drainage works done is executed by independent contractors. What are the guidelines and resources that enforce best practices in basically the existing developments, the rural developments, and the new developments?
If I understand the question properly, they're asking if the contractors who do the maintenance work, which is the desilting work.
Yes.
All right. We just make sure that they are guided, they are supervised. We go with them. First of all, they are from a CTB bonded list of contractors. So they are not just random contractors that are bidding. They have predetermined prices in the CTB bonded list. So we go down the list from the cheapest, and then we go up, ask them if they are willing to execute the project. If not, we go up the list as I think it's up to 10 contractors deep in for every piece of equipment. So before they do any work, we go out with them. Our supervisors go out, they show them the span of the work, they explain to them what has to be done, and then they are supervised. Otherwise, they won't be paid. But they are controlled. We make sure that they know where these private developments are. Remember, we are just staying along the watercourses. We're not doing any maintenance within any private developments. Those will be up to the developments to maintain on their own. That's why they are always bounded. So we stay on our major watercourses, clear the sides of vegetation. We also make sure we remove enough silt, and the system makes sure we have enough capacity in case we get a stormwater event that the watercourse can hold the runoff.
Sure. And this one is for Mr. Cooper. Should concreting drainage paths be encouraged or discouraged?
Can you repeat the question, Sam?
Oh, I'm sorry. Should concreting drainage paths be encouraged or discouraged? Did you hear it more clearly?
Yeah. Concreting drainage.
Should it be encouraged? Should we say yes or no to it?
I think they mean when we line the watercourses, you know.
Oh,
yes.
The drainage. Yeah, right. It depends, really. I guess that's the answer. In some instances, because you don't have the space, so you have a natural water course, but you have encroachment, as Catherine was talking about. And you have, well, right, increased rainfall, and therefore you would expect to get greater flows. You would normally want to expand your water course, but you don't have the room. And so if you were to pave that, then it increases the rate at which water flows, and therefore you effectively increase the capacity of that particular drain. So in that particular instance, it perhaps makes sense. It does provide more capacity. Normally, we try as best as possible to keep our water courses unlined. We want to keep it as natural as possible. It provides some kind of percolation, infiltration and percolation of water to the lower strata. And therefore, it keeps the hydrologic regime as we have it and the ecosystem depends on in place. So that would perhaps be, my best response. It depends really on what the circumstances.
Now, I know the questions are coming in, but I want to ask our panelists, what are your thoughts on strategies such as rainwater harvesting as a storm water management strategy? Fazir, do you want to start? And then we can get the rest of the thoughts from the other panelists.
I can start.
You're muted, Mr. Khan.
Shall I start?
Yes, yes.
Okay, right. So rainwater harvesting, we have had some discussions back and forth, is a measure that the initial focus, of course, is on ensuring that we have water for our normal domestic purposes. But it does, in fact, I guess, incidentally or coincidentally, reduce the amount of water running off from the roof and getting into our property drains and eventually into our public drains, the roadside drains, and eventually into the water courses. If we are, able to say, have a system where we have a pretty large tank, a rainfall, and it's empty at the start, a rainfall event of a particular magnitude occurs, and what will happen is that water from the roofs will go straight into the tank, the empty tank, and thereby reduce the amount of water getting into the roadside drains and the other drainage system within our community, and thereby reducing the amount of water that flows in the channel and can spill and can cause a flood. There are some ways of ensuring that you do have the capacity, but you perhaps would be looking at cases where you have a small urban catchment where you're able to get all of the communities, all of the households within the community hooked up to that particular rainwater harvesting system, and perhaps you will start seeing some impact. For larger events, you perhaps will not get the same impact. But I know Fazir has things to add to that.
I just said it, Wilson. So it only works at a large scale, and also one needs to note that typically we tend to have floods after 2 or 3 days of antecedent, what we call antecedent rainfall, and it's difficult to have rainwater harvesting tanks empty during that period. So when you need when you need the attenuation the most, the capacity just isn't there. But I do take the point that if it can be done in small urban areas in a connected way, there is some benefit that may accrue from it.
Okay. Now, I know we have a number of questions that are coming in, and I would ask Ms. Durga, do you have anything quickly to comment on that question before we move quickly?
More or less the same thing. It will only work effectively on a large scale. with the amount of water coming in. So it can be done, yes, but on a large scale, it might be more effective.
Now, you know, when we look at the general public, how can the general public contribute to flood mitigation? You know, that question about how can I be part of the solution from the very simple causes. And Mr. I see you smiling, so maybe we can start with you.
I'm smiling because that's always a question we get asked. I mean, simple things that the public can do is, let's be real. I would always go back to the garbage. I mean, if you keep, you manage your litter properly, your garbage, stop the dumping. I mean, those are simple things we can do as a body, a public, a whole. And then there is the case of not diverting water courses on your own, not building in the water courses. Those are simple things the public does. You would believe it or not, it happens more often than we have even imagined. People go in and they decide, I want a little more land. So they just go, the water is in their way. So they just backfill and narrow the water courses and think that's okay. As a public, we shouldn't be doing that. We have to respect the water and the water courses as they are, because remember, those things move. And then when you go into that piece that is not part of your development and you reclaim it per se, and then you get flooded out, you wonder why. So that's a common practice we see the general public have been, not everybody, of course, not everyone, but certain people do.
So our other two panelists, anything to add to Mr. Durga's comments?
Yeah, this is Fazir. I think one of the things that people need to stay away from is poor practice when it comes to hillside development, as I indicated before. If hillside development is not done properly, and it's usually when it's not approved, it increases erosion and thereby silt that ends up downstream, that clogs up the natural water courses, which then puts a big strain on the state to clean up these water courses. The other thing is, I think generally in Trinidad and Tobago, we need to get more serious about the legislation to do with single-use plastics and styrofoam, etc. So I know, like, for instance, in Antigua, they banned styrofoam about 6 years ago. I'm not too sure what's the status in Trinidad, but I think the public can attest when there's a flood in Port of Spain, that you can see tons of plastic bottles and other types of garbage that clogs up the natural waterways and the man-made waterways. And this would contribute not only to the higher level of flooding when it's clogged up, but it also prevents the flood from subsiding more quickly.
Super, anything to add before we go through? I know we have a number of questions coming in from social media.
Sorry, I think the other issue is that the public has to be aware of being able to speak out and let their voices be heard with respect to what kind of floods occur, and the fact that many times you would find that it can be preventable. Mm-hmm. So that's one part, that common voice, making it known that the particular circumstance is not acceptable, and we would like, in fact, for the leaders to take note and to move on it. And then the other thing, I think, is a realization that flooding is going to become more and more frequent because of climate change, and that the government, the drainage division, the central government would not be able to quickly respond to addressing these floods. There might be engineering solutions, but it might take some time. And therefore, each person has to realize that at household level, they are able to take steps to ensure that losses are minimized.
Thank you very much. And I do want to ask, when I did the introduction statement, I did say that this was a tripartite representation of discussions. But how do you really think practically that government, industry, business, and academia in this country can really work together to implement more potent drainage engineering solutions in the future? Is it happening now and we don't know about it? But how can we really make it work?
That's a head scratcher. No, it is happening behind the scenes. We have a lot of collaborations happening with public-private partnerships. We have behind the scenes work with Habitat for Humanity. Just today we had a meeting about that, working on a flood plan for Port of Spain. I know Port of Spain City Corporation does work with the Ministry of Works, seeing how we can mitigate flooding, not just in the town, but around Trinidad. Local government is reaching out. We really do have to make note of the ODPM. They have been spearheading a major project in the background. Dr. Cooper would know about CFUS, the Community Flood Early Warning System. It's something that we have been working on for the past 8 months or more. And I mean, we are bringing in the private sector as much as we can, but these things take time. We really hope that it can be sped up, but policies and programs take time to develop, but we're looking to reap the fruit of it soon. So they are happening in the background. I don't know if Dr. Cooper or Mr. Khan wants to say anything.
Yeah, I just want to talk about the data issues and I guess what appears from the outside, but it might very well be quite different, to be a lack of attention given to data collection, and as a result, you don't see the resources required for effective data collection systems. And if we continue with that, and if we continue not to give that enough attention, we will find that in the future we will be guessing about the solutions that we should employ. And I think there is a role for the private sector. Data collection does not have to be a government affair. Government can certainly determine what kind of standards are to be met and provide the necessary guidelines. But there is no reason why private enterprises cannot take it upon themselves to have various systems and to provide the data on a regular basis to the central government for processing and so on. So I think that is something that needs to be looked, determining the importance of data, realizing that we don't have all the resources, and allowing the private sector in to fill that gap.
Thank you very much. Now, I know we have a number of questions as well coming in, and we are going a little beyond time, as I mentioned earlier. So this one came in from our social media, and it's I guess either any of the panelists can take this. When rain falls heavily, now we see roads flood, drains are flooding, everywhere is flooding. Are all of our roadside drains that have been built, are they simply now all inadequate? Mrs. Durga, I think the logical starting point would be you, and then we get the gentleman to come in.
I wouldn't say that they're not adequate. I think they are trying their best to keep them well maintained. It's not that they are being overwhelmed, but if you notice, once the the roadside drains are being maintained and cleaned on a regular basis, this may be a challenge for the government, I would say, because remember, not all the roadside drains fall under the Ministry of Works. Some fall under the Ministry of Rural Development and local government. So it's a combined effort where they have their daily pays cleaning these roadside drains on a regular basis. And if one outlet is blocked, sometimes that causes the water on the roadway to pond, and it takes time for it to dissipate. But once those drains are maintained and clean, I wouldn't say that they're inadequate. They may need some maintenance, some cleaning, some of the culverts under the highways and the major roadways may need cleaning as well. Again, we come back to the issue of garbage. It may not be silted up. It may not have sand and silt per se. It may just have a bag stuck and blocking the entire thing. It happens. And the amount of rain that is falling is unprecedented. We have not seen this intensity of rainfall before. Climate change, it's real. And when these microbursts happen in certain areas, you get almost a month amount of rain in one day. And that's a lot of rain. So when we have to keep that, we look at the runoff. That's what we're trying to keep, and the quick dissipation of the water. And if the drains are maintained, they would be adequate. Most of them. Some of them, I agree, it may be too small on the size, but mostly if they're maintained and continuous maintenance is needed, that's all you need, and it works.
Let me ask the two gentlemen very quickly to give a summary. Are they adequate?
Yeah. I just want to say that, Catherine, you don't have to feel that you have caused climate change, right? I think that in fact, the intensity is significantly larger than these drains have been designed for. And we will get flooding more and more frequently. And it goes back to what Fazil said, though, it's a combination. We have the siltation coming from the hillside development that is coming down. But the other thing I think we have to realize is, if you look at many of, I guess, the communities on the east-west corridor, what we have typically is an undeveloped catchment, right? Wooded vegetation, trees and so on that fall naturally. And then they flow down. There's a central channel flowing down. It meets the major road with a bridge. And it is coming with not necessarily garbage, but it's coming with twigs and old trees and so on that have fallen. And it gets blocked there. And when it gets blocked, it spills and it flows down towards the community. So I think that one of the elements of design, I don't know if it's of major importance, is for us to have trash racks at those fringes, so that we are able to store these these woody debris and ensure that it doesn't cause flooding a bit lower down.
Sure. Zir, do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah. Recently, Alpha did a flood mitigation exercise in St. Lucia. A couple of years ago, they had major flooding, and there were large debris flows in the village of Soufriere. And I mean, it brought down, the debris flows caused entire bridges and houses and everything to flow straight down through the main watercourse into the sea. And part of the design that we had to address was exactly the structures that are required to arrest the flow of debris. So it is something that there is an engineering solution for, and but in a case like to address that in Trinidad, it will be part of public works.
Sure. Now, I know this is a question that we probably touched on various points of the presentation, but in terms of the major engineering challenges that prevent the application execution for optimal engineering solution, what do you think, and let's list it as top 2 challenges that seem to prevent us from using the optimal solutions that academia, private sector, and even public service that exists out there? Fazir, you want to start? I see you're ready to go.
Well, I don't think people would like the answer, but I mean, the solutions are pretty obvious. We have many engineers that go to the university and study, and I think we develop our practice so that we can come up with solutions. Prioritizing, of course, economics dictates everything, right? So how do we prioritize whatever monies that we have to spend in order to get the biggest bang for our buck when it comes to flood mitigation? So take the question before, where someone asked on social media, it appears that all the roadside drainage it seems to be under designed. that is an intuitive perception, and it may quite well be so because of the type of rainfall that we have in. But where does government put their money in terms of addressing major flooding problems? And it would have to be in the major river courses that contribute to flooding. So, for instance, let's call out the Caroni Plains and the Caroni River. There's a lot of work that has to be done, that can be done on the Caroni River, for instance, as an example, and where it crosses the Solomon Motoy Highway, in order to mitigate the duration of flood and the depth of flooding that is experienced by the population in that part of this country.
My answer would be data, which prevents us from making maximal use of the very sophisticated models that we have.
Mm-hmm.
If we don't have good quality data, then we will not be using the models properly. We will not be getting the outputs that are real, and therefore we are, to be safe as engineers would like to see their names on papers, we would be providing all these large safety factors so that we are sure that that drain that we constructed did not flood for that particular event. Sure. And then and it's not just hydrologic data as well, but also the damage associated with floods. How are we truly able to cost floods so that we can say that the investment justifies the cost of the particular floods?
Sure. Ms. Durga, your thoughts? What do you think is the top two challenges that prevents us from doing what people would describe, or some of our participants would describe as world-class solutions?
These world-class solutions may not be applicable here too. So as on the same train of thought that Dr. Hooper just brought in, we have a lack of not just data, but studies. So we can't just implement solutions willy-nilly. We have to know exactly what we're dealing with in different areas of Trinidad. So studies are a big thing. I know everybody don't like to hear that because it takes time, but it's true. Studies, and the lack of studies that we only have for half of Trinidad right now. And if we are, blessed to have those studies, then we can actually put into play the engineering solutions for the problems that exist in different areas. And the second thing would be adequate areas to implement some solutions. Sometimes the solution is to widen the watercourse and deepen the watercourse, but the problem is we have no access to it because of developments that go right up to the watercourse. So there's no embankments, there's no room for growth, there's only houses and then a steep drop to the river. So that's two major things I would say on my end.
We have a question, and I want to ask all of the panelists to give your opinion. Mr. Durga, I think I want to start with you. And when you hear the question, you'll understand why. Do you believe that the existing development guidelines are sufficient in light of the climate change conditions that we're seeing? And all of the panelists, you've all mentioned about the quantity of rainfall. I think one of you mentioned that what we used to see in a month, we now sometimes see in one downpour, so is it sufficient?
The short answer is no. I think we are just working with what we have. And to cater for climate change, some changes may have to be done. The developmental guidelines we have, it really is a culmination of everything that we have used over the years. But I do think the guidelines need to be revisited a bit so that we can use a factor to cater for climate change. But again, it has to be something that is on par with what we need to use across the board. We can't just use something in isolation. So it has to be discussed, it has to be finalized, and then applied across the board.
I'll ask the gentleman to weigh in quickly on this question.
All engineering designs are done within an economic context. So whenever we look at a problem, we define the problem and we look at the various solutions, the alternative solutions, and we try to come up with the optimal solution. An optimal solution, by definition, takes into consideration what the financial aspect of what you have to do, the monies that you have, and the time within which you have to implement it in order to get bring benefit to the users. So I would say that it is a major factor. We don't have a well of money that we can just sink into doing things, but there are some catchments where we have information and we have studies. We have dozens of studies. And again, I'll give the example of Solomon Hochoy Highway and the Caroni River, where the southbound lane is lower than the northbound lane. And when we do have flooding for an extended period of time, it is because the water is being held back by the northbound lane. And there are solutions for that, and also downstream meaning west of the highway itself. There is, I would think, a lot of unapproved development going on in there, where the mangrove has been encroached upon, which is the natural area for the floodwaters to dissipate.
Mr. Cooper, you have anything to add?
Not much. Just to say that I agree with Catherine that we do need to have a basis for the various factors that we have recommended. And I know that sometime maybe over 10 years ago, the issue about, at one time there was no development above 300 feet. And I think Town and Country Plan took it upon themselves to explore why that was so, with a view to developing a hillside policy that was really scientifically based. And it wasn't simply, this arbitrary value that we had, because that was as far as WASA could have pumped water up to at the time. So we need to keep looking at these things to ensure that we are able to have scientific basis for the advice, for the guidelines that we are setting, so that persons would have confidence, and not challenge them, and believe that it was some arbitrary value, and therefore they have a very good chance of winning their challenge.
Now, I want to ask, I know we did mention we started a little later than expected, so we've gone about 30 minutes over time, so we're starting to wrap up now. But there is a question that was posed. Have there been, or are there any plans to develop or make available general public flood hazard maps for Trinidad and Tobago? Anyone of the panelists can start.
I don't know of any, but I think the ministry's representative might be best to answer that.
Yes.
Yes. I think there is one available through the ODPM. The Water Resources Agency usually collects this type of data, but again, we are working with them to see how we can update those flood maps, because the rainfall we're getting now is not what we have been seeing over the years. And internally, we have started to try and collate what we have, the data that we could probably collect in-house. I can't say it's just something we newly started, but the custodian of that type of information would be the WRA. And I know the ODPM right now is trying to work on updating those maps. They may be publishing them. So I think that is on the cards through the ODPM.
Yeah,
So,
I think the map you're talking about is more susceptibility map.
Yeah,
And,
it's like a flood-prone map. That's really the areas that a flood map is what they would refer to.
Yeah, but I think you perhaps would need a little bit more detail.
Yeah.
So you would want to consider the bridges and the effect of the bridges and the channels and so on.
Okay.
And that really requires a lot of detail. In fact, you perhaps need an atlas of maps, huh? There are particular areas, cities and so on.
well, I know the problem. The problem is very
fluid. If you want to get that level of detail, you will have to have it on a large scale so that you're able to get it.
Well, I know the problem is very fluid. Climate change is drastically changing. What we're seeing 6 months ago is definitely changing every single day. So I know it's a challenge. There is one question, Ms. Durga. I think because you're representing the ministry, and for some reason, most people believe that this one really does fall for you.
Has
the government of Trinidad and Tobago done an assessment of the drainage and hydraulic capacity of the major drainage conduits, or even the cause and effect analysis of major flood events to basically inform the decision making as to what is happening at the ministry?
In some cases, I could say safely in some cases, not all the cases, because remember, that's a lot of information to be using for all the different areas that have been flooding, and to collate the data, I don't think it's effectively recorded. So even we had access to the WRA's portal, where we could have seen how much rainfall occurred in different areas where we have rainfall gauges, but most of those gauges are offline. They're not working. The stream flow gauges are not working. So it's difficult to get that information in real time to study after each flooding event. But it's being done in the areas that we can amateurly collect data. I wouldn't say it's official data, but you know, we try our best, and that's where the studies would come in. All these different types of they have some, what am I looking for? I'm looking for programs. They have programs that we can use to project and model, and those are what we use when we're designing in most cases.
Now, I know we've had a lot of information, and it's been a truly lively session. As we wrap, I do want to ask all of the panelists whether, for a couple of closing comments on this. This obviously is not an issue that's going away. We've spoken about climate change, we've spoken about the science behind it, also the data and greater collaboration. So we can go with ladies first, Mrs. Durga, your closing comments to all of our audience today.
What can I say? Thanks for coming. It's really been a lovely evening. I saw a slew of questions going in the comments. I'm sorry we couldn't address all of it, but I want to encourage you, if you have anything to add, to suggest, I mean, not verbal abuse, let's keep it down, but if you need any assistance from the Drainage Division, we are easily accessible. Just call our number. I cannot remember it at this time. I think it's 225-3661. If you need any information, if there's anything around you, you're seeing something happening, if you're seeing someone is blocking a water course, let us know. We need to address these things. Let's work together. We can handle this, and we can keep on trying to mitigate the effects of flooding. I mean, we are our brother's keeper. So thanks again for having us.
Sure. Afazir, let me ask you your closing comments.
Yeah, I'd like to thank NIHERST and APETT for allowing me to contribute to this discussion here today. This is our country, our problem, and as a community of engineers and people and scientists, quasi-scientists as well, we need to continue to put our heads together to come up with solutions and force policy changes, etc. Thank you.
Okay, Ms. Cooper, you have the final word.
Yes. So again, as Fazil said, I would like to thank APETT and NIHERST for again allowing me the opportunity for being part of this very informative, and I hope it's going to be one of many to follow. I can't help but make another plug for the importance of data and ensuring that we are able to, have the level of data quality that we need to ensure that we can make full use of all of the model capacities that are so readily available. If we have these models, but we don't have good data, we are not going to get results that can be useful.
Okay.
I also want to, make a little statement that it is about all of us. The government alone cannot solve the flooding problems, not only because it might be caused by individuals, but because of the scale of the problems that we are dealing with. And we have to change our expectations. We have to look at adapting, becoming adapting, and building systems that are resilient. so that when the floods occur, we assure that life and limb are protected and property as best as possible. The property has been secured, but then we are able to continue when the floods have subsided.
Continuity and ensuring that we can prevent as much as we can. Well, it certainly has been a truly lively and impactful discussion. I want to remind all of our participants, all those who are present, you will receive a feedback survey on your email. Just remember to fill it out. It means a lot to us. That's how we get your feedback, to ensure that we continue to have impactful discussions. And just to whet your appetite, look out for information on all of our other sessions, and our next session will be on air quality. So ladies and gentlemen, we have officially arrived at the end of this event, and on behalf of NIHERST and APETT and all of the teams involved, permit me to once again express my sincerest thanks to all of you for taking the time from your schedules to be part of this evening's information and idea exchange session. To all of our panelists, to the president of APETT, NIHERST, APETT, I know Lyndall Bartholomew is here, NIHERST Marketing, headed by Candice Hector. I know Candice has been working around the clock to make sure all of this comes to fruition. I want to say thank you, and all of your contributions are noted. And again, I urge you to remain poised for the future webinars as we continue to find solutions to the engineering challenges. I'm Hema Ramkisoon. Have a safe night.